In New York, there is a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that has just started today. It is running till May 1st. It's very timely, necessary, and I mean, it's amazing work that's being done. So Black Women's Blueprint is an organization that has focused on lifting up the voices of Black women. You know, for far too long in our history, our voices have been unheard, ignored, and disregarded, just blatantly. I think about, you know, we talk about abuses against women. I think about in North Carolina when women were forcibly sterilized. Now, it wasn't just Black women, but there was a disproportionate number of Black women that were forcibly sterilized. You hear about these things happening in other countries, but we don't ever really talk about like eugenics type programs that happen here in the United States. Happened well into the 70s in some places here in the United States. So Black Women's Blueprint, like I said, I have a friend who works for them, and she's just like, I mean, just her passion for the work that they've been doing. Back in when with the Holtzclaw trial, that's the Oklahoma police officer that rapes all those Black women. They had a group like activists, but this group in particular basically sent an envoy of sisters to stand in solidarity with the survivors of this brutal attack. You know, that case was very interesting for the fact that even though there were all these allegations, even though there were issues with this particular cop, no one really acted. You know, it took overwhelming outcry before they even removed him from his job, right? Like, so the fact that this work is being done, I mean, and that's not the only case. That's not even like an extreme case, right? There's so many instances out there of poor women, of women of color, of Black women being abused, misused, mistreated by law enforcement officers, by others in their lives, whether they're actually in their families and places of employment. I mean, that goes back to slavery in our history. And the issue, there's a serious issue in terms of not just that, well, why don't people report? Why don't people say something? You know, it gets really difficult when you're looked at an object to be sexualized as if you do not have the right to say no. Almost not quite the same, but you know, we see this with sex workers, right? Sex workers, you know, we talk about Sexual Assault Awareness Month. This absolutely applies to sex workers too. Just because my business is sex doesn't mean I can't tell you no. I mean, seriously, you don't like people. There are people who believe that if someone's a sex worker, for example, that I have the right to do whatever to you because you have sex for money. I mean, if I'm a caterer, you can't come make me cater for you just because I make food for money. Like, I mean, the fact that people disregard women and their agency and their voice, we need groups like this to have these conversations. So Truth and Reconciliation Commission, like for those who are maybe not familiar with the concept, pretty much, I mean, the most famous one we can think of is post-apartheid South Africa, when basically to kind of address the issues that happened and move forward. You know, this is not just about like, okay, let's all tell our stories and forgive people, but their strength and power and putting voice to what we've for long kept inside. And the vision and mission of Black Women's Blueprint is Black Women's Blueprint envisions a world where women and girls of African descent are fully empowered and where gender, race, and other disparities are erased. I mean, sisters are doing it for themselves because we cannot wait for anybody else to wake up and decide, hey, we're going to be nice to you and let everything, you know, be on the right page and stuff. So they are in New York right now. They are based in Brooklyn, but you know, they have membership all over. And the commission is started today, and there has been testimony and conversation, basically people sharing their stories and telling their truth, you know, providing a space for survivors of sexual assault and abuse to not only share their voice and their stories, but to collectively demonstrate the human rights atrocity that exists and that happens, right? There we already have issues with people addressing issues of rape and sexual assault in general. Again, like I said, like, you know, when you look at the statistics, you know, that ability to actually address these issues, it increases astronomically when we start talking about women of color and Black women in particular. When we start talking about women of African descent, it broadens our scope. So yes, we're talking about Black women in America, but then we're connected to the stories of our sisters who are abroad, right? Everybody's was concerned for a while of bring back our girls, but like there are very real ongoing issues besides, whatever the latest hashtag we decide to use is, right? So this is really about bridging, those stories, and then how do we make a path going forward? There has been a call through this commission, because there's actually a UN, there's a larger UN summit that is going on in New York as well. And so they have been trying basically or not trying, they're demanding access to be able to deliver the message, because this is something that needs to be addressed. We look at UN Commission reports, we talk about police brutality and police violence, and we see that the United States, there are disproportionate issues when we're talking about, Black and Latino, when we're specifically talking about Black people. But we focus so much on these issues when we talk about Black men, right? We're talking about violence, whether it's physical violence or whatever the case may be. We rarely talk about what is affecting Black women. And I had a comment on Twitter about what about, Black youth and Black men, and it is okay, right? It is okay for us to carve out a space that is Black women only. It is okay for us to carve out a space where our allies, so to speak, where our sisters, where our family, where people can come and support us. Because Black women, we are the backbone. I saw it said earlier, we are the backbone of the Democratic Party, for example, right? We're the backbone of the community. Black women, when you look across the board, you see Black women involved, anything and everything up and down, and it is okay for us to take time and recognize that our voice needs to be heard, that we need to be represented. And we also need to be able to step aside and just be there, to just listen to our sisters, right? We don't have to be in competitions for each other. There was the viral image of Taraji clapping, right, and celebrating. I believe it was when Viola Davis won her Emmy. That image for so many of us has been so stark and true, because at the end of the day, many times all we have are each other. My boss may be mistreating me. I may have been abused. The cops may not believe me, but my sisters will always have my back. And I'm so excited to see this type of initiative going forward. So again, today was the first day. It's going to May 1st. Today it's in Harlem. They were at Riverside Church, taking testimony, hearing stories. And Alicia Garza, one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, gave remarks earlier today. And one of the most profound statements I think that I read from her was about how not just that the United States owes Black women a debt, but that, or not even specifically that they owe Black people reparations, but that Black women are owed reparations, right? There have been so many horrors and atrocities inflicted upon us that have been state sanctioned, that have been disregarded, fallen by the wayside in history. And I just feel like being able to have these, now whether or not reparations will really ever happen for any of us, that's a whole other conversation too, right? But we do need to be comfortable with having these conversations. And it takes a lot for us, particularly when we're told that we gotta be on the team, we gotta be all about our women in general. But that sometimes that conversation of let's just talk about women's issues, there's not always a space carved out to talk specifically about the intricacy of issues affecting directly, the lives of Black women. And so I want to say to people that it's okay. It's okay. I understand that we're concerned about, our sons and our husbands and our brothers, our lovers, uncles, whoever. That's fine. We can love Black men and love us too. We need more Black men, though, to reciprocate and to hold us down, because we've been holding everybody else down for generations now at this point. And I think that, whether people begin to sufficiently acknowledge and address the atrocities that fall Black women, Black girls, we talk about, the school prison pipeline, we talk about the over punishment in schools and suspensions and stuff. We focus so much on Black boys, which, not saying that Black boys do not deserve attention, right? We focus so much on police killings and revolving around Black men. but there's very little conversation about the numbers of women who are harassed, assaulted, beaten, you know, killed by police. I mean, we all know Sandra Bland's name, but how many of you know about Rakaya Boyd, right? Like, I mean, we all know those names, but there are so many more that do not make it to a hashtag on Twitter or Facebook or wherever. I mean, so it's important to have these discussions. It's important to talk about how there are people who, whether it's through foster care, you know, I'm the daughter of a sexual assault survivor. And that is something that is borne out on the entire family structure too, right? And so it not only affects you, it affects your ability to engage in the world, and yet you're still expected to do so without any type of support or redress for the issues. We're just expected to just handle it. We don't get the time to fall apart and cry and check out of reality. We still have to do the next day, regardless of what has happened to us the day before. And it is okay for us to be vulnerable. It is okay for us to share our stories. And it's definitely okay for us to demand redress for the things that befall us. An article written by one of the speakers was in Huffington Black Voices. And this is also like with the UN. The UN, you know, the UN will do like their different, the year of whatever, or the decade of. This is the International Decade of People of African Descent, right? So what better time to address these issues, to really meet and engage people than now, right? So the author, who's a woman of color, but she's not a Black woman, she talks about how, you know, there's a compelling and timely, you know, mission from Black Women's Blueprint to examine the history, context, causes, chronology, and consequence of rape and sexual assault on women of African descent. You know, the organization seeks recognition of how Black women's rights are central to racial justice concerns of all people of African descent, a renewed focus on increasing resources to prevent sexual violence in the first place, and the creation of transformative processes to eradicate gender-based violence. I'll definitely tweet this out, but I'll retweet it out too, to give you the link. But it's like, we need strategic calls of action. We need to actively, you know, implement not just policy changes, education, you know, we need to be engaged in this work. And as we look going forward, you know, we have all these very strict, you know, lines in the sand about who we'll work with or what issues, because these are the issues that matter. We need to learn to be more fluid, because there's a lot of things going on in our individual lives. We have a lot of different levels to us. And yes, things like campaign finance support are absolutely important to me, but I'm not going to not work with some people on issues such as this, simply because we may have different politics. I mean, because there are things, we have to really look at the bigger picture. We have to look at what is the subject, what is the issue, and where are we going? Like, how are we going to get there? You may have allies in places that you never realized they even existed. And that's why I think that looking at this group, because again, when we're talking about Black women as a voting bloc, for example, right? If I had the mentality that a lot, unfortunately, Bernie Sanders seem to have, you know, that I'm not going to deal with them, I can't work with you because you supported Hillary Clinton. There are a lot of Black women who supported Hillary Clinton because she knows the language and because she has done some of this work that does actually, you know, benefit our own struggle to some extent. Not saying that, you know, that she gets a pass somehow, but I did see some tweets. There was an event that I can't remember sister's name off the top of my head. I apologize, but the executive director of Black Women's Blueprint. I saw some tweets, or maybe it was a Facebook post, where she was saying that, you know, there was the event that Secretary Clinton had in New York with Mayor de Blasio's wife, Charlene, and she got a chance to just talk to her very briefly or whatever, and that she was talking the right talk. She had the right answers to questions, and she seemed actually engaged and interested in the issues that were facing Black women, right? And when you're talking about how you want our vote, you want to earn our vote. I know people got a lot of criticism about Hillary Clinton, but when it comes to women, like Black women, there are some issues that she is speaking on more with specifics that she's connecting with. Now, we can argue to a blue in the face that Bernie is better, but at the same time, if you're not connecting with people, if I can't connect with you, we're going to have a problem. And I think that for some people, there are organizations and issues that are going on. And if you're talking all this yaya up here and you can't see what we're trying to communicate, we're not going to be able to work together. And so going forward, we have to be able to figure out, how do we connect with people, right? what matters. This is what I say to everybody all the time. If you want to talk about politics with somebody, what matters to that person more so than just what your personal viewpoint is or what you think is important. What do they think is important? Because we all bring to this work a different set of standards and issues, you know, ideas and thoughts. So definitely check out Black Women's Blueprint on Twitter and Facebook. They're tweeting, they're live tweeting. They'll be live streaming the event the rest of the week. You know, it's just a lot going on, and it's definitely an excellent, you know, group to support. If you care to donate, you know, there's information on their website about how to donate. They do several other events besides this truth. This is the first of its kind, though, and it's hopefully I'll get to watch them. You know, I know we all work and stuff, but hopefully I'll be able to catch some tomorrow. Just shout out to Kim DeLitt and the rest of the women working very hard with Black Women's Blueprint.